Okay, Year 11, this is a very short video on how to answer every question in paper 3. So I thought I'd just spend 5 minutes going through each of the questions that you'll be expected to answer in this paper. Now, again, it's really useful, this paper, that we get it right in terms of our structure. So don't start from the back and move forward. Work your way through this paper based on the questions that it's asked you. So you will start with an inference question. Question 1, give 2 things you can infer. Now, the source will be on the first page. It will ask you from 2 inferences from a source. Now, you must understand that could be a written source or a photograph. Now, the key thing you ignore in this is you ignore the provenance. Don't refer to it. The only thing you must focus on in this question is the actual source. So you give an inference and then you give a quote or description. Now, you must understand that inference is sort of reading between the lines. It's not describing. You also have to make sure that your inference and your quote are not the same. People tend to make the mistake of giving an inference and then basically writing the same thing in the detail. You should not do that. That will be 5 minutes. Look at the source and read it twice before you do the response. It's a quick question. Question 2 will be your explain question. Now, the word there that's key is your explain. So I'm not looking for a descriptive paragraph. I'm looking for evidence, but that evidence must relate to a question. So, for example, explain why Hitler became the Chancellor in 1933. You need to go down the point, evidence, explain, evidence, explain, evidence, explain. Now, you can do shorter P's, but you've got to make sure that the evidence is detailed. Focus on the evidence being detailed, then link back to the question. Explain why. You know, if you're describing Hitler's propaganda, why would that help him become chancellor? If you are describing Hitler trying to become president, why would that help him become the chancellor? So with your evidence, use phrases like, for example, moreover, furthermore. And then the key word we're looking for in explanation is because. This led to this because. Then you are addressing the question. The more detailed your evidence, the easier your explanation will be to articulate. Question 3A is how useful are sources B and C? Now, this will be in your interpretation and sources booklet that you are given. So with this, top Copo, C, what does the source show or teach you about the topic? So give 2 or 3 things that it teaches you. So source B is useful as it shows me. So if it's how useful are sources B and C for an inquiry into challenges the Weimar faced, what challenges does it show you about? Give quotes to back it up. Show that you know that you understand that source. So C, if you do content well over 2 sources, you'll probably be getting 3 out of 8. So if you just do the C part well, you could be getting 3 out of 8. So just content, 3. Then, knowledge, 1 big fact. Please do not waste loads of time on knowledge. Just 1 big fact to back it up. So with knowledge, you are looking at 1 to 2 lines. And if you do that on both sources, you could easily get 5 out of 8. Now, the provenance, remember, is the description of the source. So we're thinking who, what, when, why, but focus on the useful. Source B is a photograph that's been produced by a Nazi official. Why is that useful? Source B has been produced in 1933. Why is it useful? What was going on at the time? Use knowledge in the provenance to develop your response. If you do provenance well, that's where you can get the 8 out of 8. Now, remember, it is based on both sources. So do a separate paragraph for both sources and spend about 15 minutes on that question. It is a tricky question, but if you just do the C and the O well enough and the P to a good standard, you could get 6, 7 out of 8. And then you could do an overall at the end, but keep that to 1 to 2 lines. 3B, what are the main differences between interpretation 1 and 2? The key thing for this question, Year 11, is you do not overwrite. So what's the focus? So if it's asking you what's the main differences between the challenges, what does interpretation 1 say? Give a quote. What does interpretation 2 say? Give a quote. But if you go off the topic, you will get 0. What is the topic that it's asking you to focus on? 3B, 5 minutes, nice, easy question. Likewise with 3C, very easy question because there's only 1 way to answer it and there's only 1 way you should stick to. Why are the interpretations different? And the first sentence that you must always write is, they give weighting to different sources. If you write that, that's going to put you in much better stead because you will actually get a mark for that. Then interpretation 1 matches with source because, and interpretation 2 matches with source because. Now make sure when you're doing your explanation, you mention both interpretation and source. And don't put own knowledge. Don't put own knowledge into question 3B, the main difference, and don't put knowledge in 3C. Again, 5 minutes. It's all about structure. You can get 12 marks on this paper with having no knowledge, just an understanding of the skill and the structure. Then the last question, you need to be giving yourself 30 minutes. How far do you agree with? So you need to start with the interpretation that the question asks you. So if it says, how far do you agree with interpretation 1? I agree. What's the message of that interpretation? Quote knowledge, quote knowledge, quote knowledge. The knowledge must be detailed. And then overall, how far do you agree with it? If it's a question about why Hitler became the Chancellor, and one of them was about the Wall Street crash, and one of them was about Hitler's oracy skills, which one do you think is the more convincing argument? So you must always start with the interpretation that it asks you, give the message, give a quote that you agree with, give detailed knowledge, give another quote, detailed knowledge, another quote, detailed knowledge, and overall. Make sure your quotes and your knowledge link. Then, on the other hand, you also agree with the other interpretation. What's the message? Quote knowledge, quote knowledge, quote knowledge, overall. Then in conclusion, do you agree with the interpretation that you were asked about? Why? Do you agree more or less with the other interpretation and why? But nevertheless, what's your final answer? You must spend about 30 minutes on that. You must be writing 2 to 3 pages to show there's a balanced argument, but you show your opinion. It's nice to say that you strongly agree, slightly agree, somewhat agree with the quotes. But the key thing is that you show that your knowledge is detailed there and show that you have a knowledge and understanding of the interpretations in front of you. That is the main way to answer paper 3. If you stick to this way, you will do very, very well over that paper.